Hello guys, once again this is Dr. A. Estiva. So last time we have already discussed an overview about cancer. We've also discussed the main anatomy and how the cancer cells replicate. And we've also had a discussions regarding who are the common persons that might be affected by cancer, as well as the different diagnostic procedures that they could undergo. As for today, we are going to have the cancer treatment modalities. So always remember, if we are dealing with cancer treatment modalities, most likely it would involve ORCID, ORCHID. Okay, so that's ORCID. So just for instance, so O stands for operation. So sometimes it means it is the same with surgery. So different surgical procedure. So R is radiation or radiation therapy. C are the chemotherapy. H stands for hormonal therapy. I, we have the immunotherapy, and B, we have the bone marrow transplantation. So those are the different cancer treatment modalities that we are going to discuss. So let's start with the surgery or the operation. So there are different operations that cancer patients would undergo. So it depends upon what type of cancer does this persons are experiencing. For example, if they have breast cancer, so most likely they would undergo MRM or the modified radical mastectomy. Okay, so if that is a testicular cancer, so it could be orchiectomy. So that's why it depends upon which part of the body is affected for our operation or surgery. So what is important that we need to remember are the different phases of operation or the surgery. So in perioperative, so we have three phases. So the first phase that we have is our preoperative phase, okay? Then we have the intraoperative and the postoperative phase. So when we deal with the preoperative, so who among you could still remember preoperative? Okay, anyone? Yes, you? Okay, so when we talk about preoperative phase, so basically it starts from the decision of the patient and the relatives to undergo operation, and it will end when the patient is placed on the OR or the operating room table. Okay, so there are different important things that we need to do during the preoperative phase. So basically, all of the preparation for our clients, all the things that needed for the operation, and things that our patients and their relatives needs to know should be discussed and should be done during the preoperative phase. So one of those important things is that we need to have an informed consent. Okay, so we need to have an informed consent. So when we are dealing with informed consent, so make sure that the patient is in a majority age, okay, and they are mentally competent. So they are the one who could be able to give consent for the informed consent. So as nurses, what we are going to do is we could be the witness. However, make sure that the consent was got by the medical doctor or the surgeon who was going to do the operation. Okay, making sure that everything is being clarified and discussed by the surgeon to the patient and to his or her relatives. So other things that we are doing here are we are giving preoperative meds. Most likely, we need to have a baseline data of the vital signs. We need to check whether the patient is ready for the operation. If we need to change the clothing of the patient into an OR gown, if there are nail polish, jewelries, we need to check all of those things before um, sending the patient to the operating room. Okay? So the next phase that we have is the intraoperative phase. So basically, this one starts, obviously, as what you have said earlier, preoperative ends when the patient is placed on the OR table. So basically, intraoperative phase starts when the patient is placed on the OR table, and it will end when the patient is endorsed to the PACU, or the post-anesthetic care unit, or in some hospitals they are called as the recovery room. So basically, this phase, there are things that we need to remember as nurses. So we need to maintain the sterile technique. We need to maintain the sterility of the field. So basically, as nurses, we need to look at on the patient's safety and the effect of anesthesia to our patient. So in some cases, we could, as nurses, we could act as a scrub nurse, or we could be a circulating nurse. So we could be part of the surgical team in making sure that everything is being provided and being looked after. Okay, so aside from the safety of the patient and looking on the effects of the anesthesia, as nurses, we really need to make sure that we could be able to provide the things that are needed by the surgical team and by our patients. So basically, those are the things that we need to make sure that we are doing during the intraoperative phase. And lastly, we have the post-operative phase. Okay, so this starts when the patient is endorsed to the recovery room or to the PACU, and it ends. Some book says that it ends when the patient is endorsed on the ward. However, there are some books that claiming that the post-operative phase will end up to the home care, up to the visit, or the checkup of the patient into to the surgeon after being discharged. Okay, so basically, if we are dealing with the post operative phase, we need to do the ABC of the post operative phase. So what are the ABCs of the post operative phase? So first, letter A, we need to assess the airway. Okay, assess the airway, making sure that there are no obstruction, making sure that our patient could be able to breathe normally. So telling that, making sure that we wanted our clients to breathe normally. So that's our letter B, which is that we need to do the breathing assessment. Okay, we need to check the RR, not only the count or the number of the respiratory rate, but the characteristic of the breathing pattern of our patients. Okay, and letter C, we need to check the effects of the anesthesia. What level is the anesthesia? We also need to check for the IV fluids of our patient. Maybe we could also check the input and the intake and output, and we could also check for any signs of complications. Okay, so since we are dealing with complications, basically, so what are the common complications that our patients or our clients who undergone surgery could have? So what could be our complications? Okay, so anyone? Yes, of course, because we are opening the part. Okay, so most likely there could be bleeding, and if there is a severe bleeding, it could result to hemorrhage, and we know that if there's a lot of blood losses that would happen during the surgery, it could lead to hypovolemic shock. It could lead to a shock, particularly hypovolemic shock. So don't forget that we need to assess the vital signs. Please be mindful if the client is experiencing hypotactac, meaning to say they are experiencing hypotension, tachycardia, and tachypnea. So as nurses, we need to think of that most likely our patient will be experiencing or is experiencing shock. Okay. So other possible complications, anyone? Yes, yes, that is right because they are on a bed rest on quite a long period of time. There is a possibility that they could have bed sores, okay, or they could have pneumonia. And we know that if our client had pneumonia, so most likely they could experience atelectasis or lung collapse later on. So we, as nurses, we really need to look on those things, okay? So other things that we need to look at is the abdominal incision. Okay, so how was it? How's the incised wound? Okay, because there is this thing called as dehiscence, right? So again, when we deal with dehiscence, it means that the wound ruptures along the surgical incision. So meaning to say, in our own language, we could, or in layman's term, they are telling that there is an opening on the surgical wound. Okay, so that is dehiscence. So wound ruptures along the surgical incision, and we also have the evisceration. Okay, so evisceration. When we talk about evisceration, it means that there could be a removal of the viscera. Okay, so meaning to say that internal organs in the abdominal cavity might say hello to the outside world. Okay, so we call it as evisceration. So again, dehiscence is rupture of the surgical incision, and evisceration is the removal of the viscera. Okay, so one of the possible complications that, aside from those things, that a surgical patient could experience is paralytic ileus. That is why, if you would notice that nurses are always asking patients who undergone operation or surgery whether they farted already. Okay? Because if they farted already, it means that there is already a peristaltic movement and the patient is now safe and they could have their diet, okay, the food that they could have. Okay, however, if there is no, if they are not yet fighting, so maybe it would lead to paralytic ileus, and we don't like it. That's why, as much as possible, we are encouraging our patients to have bed mobility up to the point that they could sit on their bed and stand and later on walk, because of those things would help to prevent having a paralytic ileus. And of course, what are the other possible complications? Yes, one of the most common complications that our client could experience is infection. So there are warning signs that we need to look, okay, just to tell whether our clients is experiencing infection. So always remember RIDA, okay, RIDA. So R stands for redness. E, so meaning to say the wound is red. It has erythema. Okay. We could notice that there could be an edema on the wound. D is for the drainage. Okay, so we need to look for the amount, the color, and the odor of the drain. Okay, most likely if there are pus, if there is some odor coming from the wound, so it would we could sense that there is an infection on our patient. And A, we have the approximation of the wound edges. Okay, so usually if there's no infection, so it will heal properly. It looks good and nice. Okay. However, if there are edges on the wound, on the wound approximation, so it would suggest that there is a big possibility that our patient is experiencing an infection. Okay? So basically, those are some of the things that we need to remember in taking care of our patients who will undergo or undergoing and had undergone an operation or surgery. Okay? So I am hoping that the operation or the surgery in the orchid is clear to everyone. Are we good? Yeah? Okay, so thank you very much. So let's move on to the next treatment modality that we have, and that is radiation therapy. Okay, so when we deal with the radiation therapy, um, what we need to remember is that radiation therapy deliver a precise dose of ionizing radiation without affecting healthy tissues. Okay, so that is clear when it is stated there that our radiation therapy is a precise dose. Okay, it is a precise dose of ionizing radiation, and most likely it will not affect our healthy tissue. Okay, so most likely. Okay, so basically what does our radiation therapy do is that they destroy the DNA of the double helix. We all know that the structure of our DNA is a double helix. Okay, so meaning to say it would be harder for anything to destroy it. But because of radiation therapy, it has the power to destroy the double helix of our DNA. Okay? So basically, our radiation therapy um, could be used as a diagnosis. Okay, it could be used as a diagnosis because, for example, we all know that X-ray is a diagnostic procedure, and that is a radiation therapy. So that's an example wherein radiation therapy could be used for diagnosis. However, in terms of cancer, we need to remember that our radiation therapy could be used as a treatment. Okay, it could be used as a treatment. Okay, so as a treatment, our radiation therapy could be used as a primary curative role. Okay, so meaning to say it is the main source or it is the main treatment that could be given to our client. Okay, however, in some other cases, radiation therapy could be used as a palliative treatment, meaning to say that it could only be used just to relieve the pain, okay, that our clients are experiencing. Before, we've already discussed that one of the common complaints of our patients with cancer is pain. And for us to be able to manage the pain that they are experiencing, we could also use radiation therapy. And if we're using radiation therapy just to relieve the pain, meaning to say it is being used for palliative treatment. And in some other cases, radiation therapy could be used as an adjunct treatment, meaning to say it could be used together with other therapy. It could be used in conjunction with chemotherapy perhaps or with a surgery. Okay? So when we are dealing with radiation therapy, we have two types of radiation therapy. So what are the two types of radiation therapy? It could be an external radiation therapy or it could be an internal radiation therapy. Okay? So let's move forward. So let's start with our external radiation therapy. Okay, so our external radiation therapy is also known as teletherapy. Okay, so sometimes once you hear teletherapy, it means that it is external radiation therapy. And it is obvious that this type of radiation therapy, meaning to say it is external, it is from outside of our body. So, meaning to say that a teletherapy delivers radiation to a tumor by means of external machine. Okay, there is an external machine and there is a predetermined distance, and they will just focus the external machine into an area or into a point wherein they want to deliver the radiation. Okay, so there are usually, if our patients or if our client will undergo teletherapy, so there could be some side effects that they could experience because of the radiation that is focused in a certain area. So it could result to skin irritation. There could be an erythema, a redness on that area. The patient might experience fatigue. Okay, so most likely it seems that they are so tired after the treatment session. Some of them could experience nausea and vomiting. Okay, so usually they would tell that they feel warm or there is they feel hot. Okay, and there are redness because of the radiation. Okay, however, we need to tell them that they need to report if their body temperature is 37.7 degrees Celsius and above. Okay, if they have low grade fever. Okay, so they need to report at once because normally if they have teletherapy, yes, it is quite hot, it is warm in the body. However, it won't give you fever even though it's a low grade fever. So again, what we need to remember for teletherapy is we are using external machine. Okay, we are using external machine. So it could be cobalt, it could be linear accelerator. Okay, as long as it is administered through an X-ray machine. So that is the external machine that is being used for teletherapy. So usually if we are having teletherapy, one of the most common um, thing that we could notice is the skin irritation, the erythema, and that is one of the most common complaint of our patients. Okay, so with that, we could say that the most common, one of the common nursing diagnosis that they could have is impaired skin integrity. Okay, so for our nursing care, if they have this irritation, if they have this erythema, so always remember, okay, always remember the ABCs of our um, nursing care. Okay, so what are the ABCs? Okay, so let's start with letter A. So for letter A, we need to tell them to avoid direct sunlight. Okay, they need to avoid direct sunlight. That is letter A. Next, let's have letter B. So for letter B, body lotion, talcum powder should be avoided. We need to tell them not to put anything on the area, on the irradiated area. That is why we are telling them to not use any lotion or talcum powder or anything on the irradiated part. Okay. So next, letter C, we need to tell them to cleanse the irradiated area. However, in cleaning it, we could use water and a mild soap, okay? And make sure that if you're going to dry the area, we just need to pat dry. Okay, do not rub. What you need to do is pat dry. Okay, and next, letter D. So for our letter D, so we need to tell them do not erase the markings. Okay, so that there is a sign where thus the irrigated area is located from the last session. Okay, so do not erase the markings. And we also need to tell our clients Okay, we also need to tell our clients that these patients who undergone teletherapy is not a source of radiation. Okay, even though they had radiation therapy, we need to reassure them. We need to tell them, tell our client that they are not source of radiation. Okay, because there are no radiation anymore. Because the radiation came from an external machine. Okay, and it is not within their body. So that is one of the things that we need to tell them, okay, that they are not a source of radiation. So are we good with a teletherapy or the external radiation therapy? Okay, are we good? Yes? Okay. So if yes, we are, let's proceed with the second type of radiation therapy. And the second type of radiation therapy is known as the internal radiation therapy. Okay? So since this is internal, meaning to say there is something that will be inside our body that could be sourced of the radiation. So if those clients who undergone external radiation therapy are not source of radiation, so now if they had an internal radiation therapy, so they could be a source of radiation because there is something within their body that is a source of radiation. By the way, when we deal or when we talk about internal radiation therapy, it is also known as brachytherapy. Okay, so other term for internal radiation therapy, we have brachytherapy. Okay, so we have the brachytherapy. So when we talk about brachytherapy, it delivers radiation within or near the tumor. Okay, by means of it could be systemic. So um, when we deal with systemic, it means that they are metabolized. Okay, so it could involve administration through IV, or it could also be through oral routes, just like what they are doing for thyroid cancer. So that is systemic. It could be interstitial. When we talk about interstitial, so it involves implantation. Okay, there could be an implantation of needles, wires, or seeds into the tissue that could be a source of radiation. Okay, so that's why it is called interstitial. So it is in between. Okay, so it is in between. So you should in between the tissues. Okay, so usually this one, the interstitial route, is usually being given for those with prostate cancer and retinoblastoma. Okay, so the last means is intracavity. Okay, so it means within the cavity. Okay, it means within the cavity. So when we talk about intracavity, so it involves placing an implant into the body cavity. So for us to be able to put the radiation, the source of radiation within the cavity, it requires surgical procedure. So usually this type of route for our internal radiation therapy or brachytherapy could be used for those with uterine cancer and cervical cancer, for example. Okay, so if we are going to give brachytherapy, if our client is having an internal radiation therapy or brachytherapy, always remember the principles. Okay, always remember the principles. Our principles involve STD. Okay, STD. So our principle involves S. Okay, when we talk about S, it means we need to use a shield. Okay, we need to have a shield. Okay, we need to have a shield for our protection. So usually we use lead, sorry, we use lead shield during contact. Okay, if for example there are things that we need to dispose, most likely we need to put it on a lead container. Okay, we need to put it on a lead container. So as person who are dealing patients with brachytherapy, so we need to protect ourselves using lead protections. Okay? So next, we have T. Okay? The T stands for timing. Okay? Time. So meaning to say, we need to check our contact with our patient. Okay? So basically, T is for time. And if we talk about time, it deals with our contact. Okay? So contact. So we need to limit our contact with our client. So most likely we only have 5 minutes each time we are going to go to our patient, to our client with brachytherapy. Okay, 5 minutes to do things that we need to do with a total of 30 minutes for the whole 8 hours shift. Okay, so if we have 8 hours shift, so we could only have 30 minutes contact with the patient. So if we're going to divide it with 5 minutes each contact, we just need to go there 6 times. Okay, 6 times. So most likely vital signs taking and medication and doing some other basic nursing procedures. And again, always remember that we need to limit our contact for 5 minutes. Okay? So lastly, we have the letter D. So D is distance. We need to distance ourselves to the clients with brachytherapy. Again, why? Because they are the source or they could be source of radiation. Okay, so for distance we need to maintain 3 to 6 feet distance when we are not performing nursing care to our client. Okay, but of course if we are performing nursing care, so we need to be near them, but we really need to limit the number of time that we are going to um, be super near them. Okay. So again, maintain 3 to 6 feet. Sorry, 3 to 6 feet distance. Okay. Once again, it's 3 up to 6 feet. Okay. If we are not performing any nursing procedure. Okay. So with that being said, if we have clients who are having radiation therapy. So we need to do the radiation precautions, specifically for patients who are undergoing brachytherapy. Okay? So if our client is having brachytherapy, since they are source of radiation, so they need to use a private room. Okay? For their protection and the protection of others. So we need to um, give them a private room. So in terms of activity, most likely they have a complete bed rest. Okay, they could be they could have urinary catheter so that they could just pee anytime. Okay, when there is a pee. Okay, for bowel, so usually they could be given stool softener so that they won't exert much effort when they are, or they would not strain when they need to move their bowel. So we could give them, as long as it is prescribed by the doctor, stool softener. And for their diet, so most likely what we wanted for their diet is to increase the protein so that they could recover more. Okay. However, even though we are increasing the protein, we need to make sure that their diet is low residue. Okay, low residue so that they won't have a bulk of a poop after. Okay, so the most common nursing diagnosis that we could have most likely is not on the physical thing. Okay, because they are a source of radiation, they are being isolated. Okay, so most likely one of the most common nursing problem or nursing diagnosis that we could see is social isolation that really affects the morale and the emotions and mentality of our patient. And at this case, it is not only the patient who could have health problems or health issues, even the nurses. Okay, we could have alteration in our protection because of the brachytherapy, because our client has or is a source of radiation. Okay, so here are some of the nursing care that we could do if our client is having internal radiation therapy or brachytherapy. Okay, so one, we need to avoid overexposure to the client and always use the STD. Okay, we always need to use the shield. Okay, it should be lead. We need to use lead containers. We need to use lead shielding and protection. Okay, for the time, again, we only have 5 minutes each time that we are going to do our nursing care for our patients with brachytherapy. Okay, maximum of 30 minutes for 8 hours shift. And D, our distance. Um, if we're not doing any nursing care and we are just checking on our client, we always need to have 3 to 6 feet distance. Okay. So aside from that, we also supervise exposure of the staff and the visitors. Okay, we need to check who are coming in and out of the patient. Okay. Again, I'm telling that because we are wanting to protect our patient and wanting to protect those people that are interacting with them. Okay, so make sure if there are people who's going to be there, they also need to do the STD principles that we have. Okay, so since they are a source of radiation, so we are strongly telling the visitors not to visit if they are pregnant, if there's a child, so they are no, okay, on the area. If they have, if they are not well and feeling sick, so they are not also advised to visit and go to a patient with a brachytherapy. Okay, so for body excreta, like stool, the urine, the feces, okay, they should be placed in a lead container for disposal. Or even if the radioactive material, for example, was the sludge on the part, on the body, okay, we need to store the radioactive material in a lead container to prevent possible contamination. Okay, so much for that for brachytherapy, right? There's quite a lot of things that we need to remember. So here are some other things that we need to remember. So side effects, okay? So one of the side effect is skin irritation. For our skin irritation, brachytherapy could cause erythema, it could cause desquamation. Okay, because of those things, as nursing care, we need to keep the area dry. Okay, we could wash the area with water and pat dry it. Okay, once again, do not rub. We need to tell them not to point or to apply any ointment, powder, lotion on the area and use only soft cotton fabrics for clothing just to make sure that there's no irritation. Okay, we are lessening the irritation that our client might experience. Okay, So the next one, we have infection. So because their immune system is low due to the bone marrow suppression. So with that, that's why I'm telling that if the visitors are not feeling well, if they are sick, we are also advising them not to go and visit every patient. Okay. So since one of the side effects is a possible infection, so our nursing care involves monitoring of the blood count weekly, okay? Just to see whether the patient is getting an infection or not, okay? Plus, we also need to campaign for a good personal hygiene, okay? Because we all know that sanitation is a good thing for us to combat the infection or not, or for our patient not to have any type of infection. Okay, so for our other things that we could do is nutrition. Okay, make sure that they could eat good food that are within their diet, and we need to give them adequate time for rest and sleep. Aside from those things, we could also teach them any signs of infection and report it at once so that we are aware of what is happening. Okay, so most likely when we talk about infection, one of the first signs that we would notice is the elevation in the body temperature. So they could have fever. Okay, next we have hemorrhage. Okay, so for our hemorrhage, okay, so what we could do is to monitor the um, the platelet count of the patient. Okay, so why? Because platelets are vulnerable during radiation. Okay, so it might deplete the platelet. So that's why we need to monitor the platelet count. We also need to instruct the patient to avoid physical trauma. That is why the activity is complete bed rest, right? Okay. And tell them to not use any aspirin, for example. If they have fever, they could not they cannot use aspirin as an antipyretic because it is also used as an anticoagulant. Okay, so we could also teach our patients the signs of hemorrhages, and we could also tell them to report once they have wounds, scrapes, or anything. And as nurses, if we are giving them IM or injections, okay, intramuscular, so we need to apply direct pressure over the injection site to make sure that it won't bleed. Okay. So next we have fatigue. Okay, for fatigue, basically what we need to do, by the way, clients could have fatigue as a result of the increased metabolic demand because of tissue repair. Okay, so since they could be tired easily, so what we could do is to provide plenty of time for them to rest and to sleep. Okay, we could also offer good nutrition. So next side effect is weight loss. So usually, actually, it's not only because of the radiation therapy, that's why they are having weight loss. It is because of the anorexia, okay, anorexia that they could experience, so they have loss of appetite. And usually weight loss is also secondary as an effect of cancer and because of the pain that they are experiencing. So as nurses, what we could do to help combat the weight loss that they might experience is that we could give them small frequent feedings. Okay, small frequent feedings. So next, because of the warmth and hotness that they are experiencing, so they could have stomatitis. So when we deal with stomatitis, what do we mean by stomatitis? Yes, anyone? Yes, you. What do you mean by stomatitis? Okay, so stomatitis is the ulceration of the oral mucous membrane. Okay, so that is the ulceration of the oral mucous membrane. And for our nursing care, what we could do is maybe we could administer analgesic before meals so that they could be able to eat. Okay, but usually again, it is depending on the doctor's order. Okay, um, other things is blend diet. So make sure that it is not too spicy, not too tasty. Okay. We should also tell them to avoid smoking and alcoholic beverages. We need to remind them, or maybe we could also perform the oral hygiene for them. Okay. Usually, we need to tell them to do oral hygiene every 2 hours. So they could have a gargle. When they're going to gargle, they could use normal saline solution, or they could use but not do not use alcohol-based product as for the gargling. Okay. So other things that they could do, they could have sugarless lemon drops or mint or candies to help them salivate. Okay, to help them salivate so that it's not that painful. Okay, and lastly, we have nausea and vomiting. So for nausea and vomiting, what could we do if the patient has nausea and vomiting? Usually, if they are experiencing nausea and vomiting, we are not going to give anything to them while they have nausea and vomiting. Okay, but after that, we could give small frequent feeding. We could give ice chips. Okay, so something like those things to manage the nausea and vomiting of our patient. Okay, so basically we are done. We are done with radiation therapy. So moving forward, let's move on to our next cancer treatment modality, and that is chemotherapy. Okay, so chemotherapy is used to destroy all malignant tumor cells. Okay, all malignant tumor cells. That is how powerful chemotherapy is. But the problem here is they are destroying all tumor cells, all malignant tumor cells, without excessive destruction of the normal cells. So, without excessive destruction, however, it still destroys some normal cells. Okay? So, chemotherapy is used to control tumor growth if cure is no longer possible. So it could, meaning to say that chemotherapy could also be used as a main treatment, the primary source of treatment for our patient. However, it could also be used as a palliative treatment, in meaning to say the patient won't be cured. However, they could be able to control the growth of the tumor. Okay, and it could also be used as an adjunct or adjuvant therapy. So meaning to say it could be also used in connection, in relation with other um, cancer modality treatments that we have. Okay, moving forward. So here are the possible contraindications. So who are or what are the different cases that we consider as a contraindication for clients who are using or going to have chemotherapy? Okay, one is infection. Okay, because we need to remember that anti-tumor drugs are immunosuppressive. So meaning to say, if they already have infection, they are already immunosuppressed, then we're going to give another thing that would make them immunosuppressed more, so we are just aggravating the problem, the scenario. So another contraindication is if they had a recent surgery, because chemotherapy would be able to delay, or they would retard the healing process of our patient. So the wound that they have would heal slower if they are having or taking chemotherapy. So next, those clients with impaired renal or hepatic functions, it is obvious. We all know that all of the medications or most of the medications are renal toxic and hepatotoxic. Okay, they are nephrotoxic and they are hepatotoxic. So how much more the chemotherapy, the drugs that are used for chemotherapy. So they are also hepatotoxic and nephrotoxic. Okay, so talking about toxicity, it only shows that pregnant women are also contraindicated to use chemotherapy because of its effect, okay? Because the drug that are used for chemotherapy are teratogenic, okay? So they could cause congenital defects. They could cause congenital anomalies on the baby. Okay, so next, patients with bone marrow depression. So just like infection, okay? So we know that one of the effect of our chemotherapy is that they might just aggravate the condition. Okay, if we are dealing with bone marrow depression, it means that these patients or these clients are immunosuppressed. Okay, so it will only aggravate the condition of the patient if they are already immunosuppressed. So WBC level must be within normal limits before giving chemotherapy. And lastly, if they had a recent radiation therapy. So same thing because they could cause immunosuppressant. Okay, they are immunosuppressant as well. Okay, so here are the possible side effects that our client might have or might experience. Okay, so one is temporary alopecia. So what do we mean by alopecia? Yes, alopecia. So meaning to say that they might have or they will have hair fall, okay? Because chemotherapy would affect the hair follicle, okay? They are telling that usually on the 14th, 14th day after the initiation of chemotherapy, the hair starts to fall. Okay, that's why they are experiencing temporary alopecia. But if you've noticed, the term is temporary alopecia. So meaning to say, after a while, it will grow back. However, if it grows back, it would be on a different color, a different texture, okay? The hair of the client is different from their hair before. Okay, so while they are having temporary alopecia, what could we do? So if it is an adult, so they could use bandana. Okay. If they are female, they could use bandana. They could use wigs or hair pieces. If they are male, they could use cup or baseball caps. Okay. Same with children, they could use baseball caps for male and female, and they could use the hair pieces, the hair clips for female, for girls, okay? Other things that we could do is we could also tell them to have cold shower and cold compress just to um, lessen the warmth that they are experiencing, okay? So another, since there is warmth that they could experience, so another possible thing that we could see as a side effect is stomatitis. So once again, what's stomatitis? Okay, we've already talked about it earlier, right? Okay, so stomatitis is the ulceration of the oral mucosa. Okay, so the mucous membrane is being affected. So usually, we would notice that there are ulceration on their oral cavity. Okay, and because of that, so they could experience pain upon ingestion. That's why most likely they would have anorexia. Okay, so how could we help them? So children could have smooth, soft diet. Okay, they could have gelato, ice cream. Okay, for dessert, just to ease the pain. Usually, if we're eating cold things, right? It numbs the area. And for adult, what we can do is to tell them to use anesthetic mouthwashes, or they could gargle with normal saline solutions. Okay. So other things that might be affected by chemotherapy, they could also experience nausea and vomiting, meaning to say that the stomach lining could also be affected. Okay, so how could we know if the patient's stomach lining is affected? So usually, because of the nausea and vomiting, they could experience hypokalemia. Okay, so you all know hypokalemia now, right? Okay, they could also experience metabolic alkalosis. So I believe you're already done with your fluids and electrolytes. So most likely you know those things, and you know how to check whether they have hypokalemia and they are experiencing metabolic alkalosis. Okay, so for our nursing care, as ordered, we could give antiemetic. Okay, what is the common antiemetic that you know? Okay, is there anyone? Okay, so as long as you could give antiemetic, okay, as long as it is prescribed by the doctor, so we could give them. And to manage the nausea and vomiting, just what I've told you earlier, so we are not going to give them anything while they are having nausea and vomiting periods or episodes. But if the episode, the nausea and vomiting subside, so we could give small frequent feeding. Okay, next one is chemotherapy could cause sterility, especially for males. Okay, the sperm cell could die because of the chemotherapy. So because of that, if the patient is scheduled for chemotherapy, what we could do is to tell them to have their sperm on a sperm bank. Okay, so that there is a chance for them to have a child later on, an offspring. Okay, so if they are going to have their sperm on a sperm bank, we need to tell them that there should be no sex, no masturbation for 72 hours before the sperm banking, to make sure that there are an ample amount or proper amount of sperm cells that could be put on the sperm bank. Okay. So last side effect that we have that we could see on our slide is bone marrow depression. Okay. So usually because of the bone marrow depression, we could also notice that they could have low RBC. So we could tell that they could have anemia. It could also affect the WBC, so they could have leukopenia. It could also affect the platelet count, so they could have thrombocytopenia, so they could um, have the possibility of deficiency of platelet, so that leads to bleeding into the tissue. They could have easily bruise, and they could experience low blood clotting. Okay, so usually, if the patient is experiencing bone marrow depression, the common things that we could notice is that they are pale because they are anemic. Okay, they have body weakness. They could experience fatigue. Okay, and there is a shortness of breath. Okay, so for our nursing care, for bone marrow depression, um, we could have, as our nursing diagnosis, what we could have is activity intolerance. Okay, so we need to manage activity intolerance. What are the things that we could do if there's an activity intolerance? Another possible thing, another possible nursing diagnosis that we could see here is risk for injury because of the neutropenic precaution, because of the abnormal few neutrophils that they have, which means that they are susceptible for infection. Okay, they are other things because of the low platelet count, so there could be a possibility for fluid volume deficit because of the bleeding. Okay, because of that, so bleeding precaution is a must. If that is a guy, we need to tell them not to use any sharp objects. So if they need to shave, so they could use electric razor rather than the blade, the shaving blade that they are using. Okay, because electric razors are safer as compared to blades. Okay, so we're almost there. We're not yet done with chemotherapy, but I think we're halfway through chemotherapy. So let us continue. So there are different types of chemotherapy or chemo drugs that we are using. Okay, so what are those things? So we have the antimetabolites, we have the alkylating agents, we have the plant alkaloids. So plant alkaloids are also known as vinca alkaloids. Okay, vinca alkaloids. And we have the anti-neoplastic antibiotics. These are also called sometimes as cytotoxic antibiotics. Okay, so those are the common types or categories of chemo drugs that might be used for our client. So when we talk about antimetabolites, they are specific phase, okay? Meaning to say that they interfere metabolites or nucleic acid necessary for RNA and DNA synthesis. Okay, so they could, antimetabolites could work, okay, during the RNA and DNA synthesis. That's why it is called as a specific phase. Okay, so the next one is alkylating agent. So alkylating agent is a non-phase specific. And what they do is they act by interfering with DNA replication. Okay, so we have the plant alkaloids or the vinca alkaloids. So it is also specific phase that they inhibit cell division. Okay, and lastly, the cytotoxic antibiotics or the anti-neoplastic antibiotics are also non-phase specific that disrupt or inhibit the DNA or the RNA synthesis. Okay, moving forward, let's try to differentiate the four and let's try to give examples of chemo drugs under each of the categories that we have. Okay? Okay, so our first category is the anti-metabolites. Okay? So, for our anti-metabolites, so here are some of the common examples of the chemo drugs that are being used under the anti-metabolites. Okay, so one is the methotrexate. Okay, methotrexate, the common brand names that we have for methotrexates are we have the Folex and the Rumatrex. Okay, so what do we need to remember if we are giving client methotrexate? So we need to remember that methotrexate is hepatotoxic. Okay, well actually we've already discussed earlier that almost all of the medications are nephro and hepatotoxic. But particularly our methotrexate is hepatotoxic and it could also cause some GI complications. Okay, so since it could cause GI complications, so um, they could experience nausea and vomiting, they could experience diarrhea, okay, so and the like. So we just need to do what is needed based on um, what are the signs and symptoms that or what complications that they are experiencing. However, for hepatotoxic, what we really needed to do is to monitor the transaminase levels. Okay, so meaning to say we need to monitor the SGPT, the ALT of our patients. Okay. So next, we have the mercaptopurine. Mercaptopurine. So with the word purine, do you have any idea what could be the effect of this medication? So common brand name of mercaptopurine is Purintol. Okay, Purintol. So basically, our mercaptopurine side effects are bone marrow toxicity, okay, and it could also lead to GI toxicity. But once again, since there is purine there, one of the things that we need to take note is that they could experience hyperuricemia. Okay, they could experience hyperuricemia. So meaning to say there could be an increase on the yes, uric acid. So that is right. There could be an increase on the uric acid. So there, since there's an increase in the uric acid, usually what is the medication that's been given to them? Okay. Okay. So we have allopurinol. And what is important is to make sure that they are well hydrated. So if our clients are taking mercaptopurine, so make sure that they could be able to drink water, okay, a lot of water or fluids, okay. So next, the next one that we have is our 5-fluorouracil, okay, so 5-fluorouracil. So brand name is 5-fu. So 5, F is fluoro, U is uracil. So 5-fu, 5-fluorouracil. Okay, so common side effects of this medication, they could lead to GI toxicity. It could lead to bone marrow suppression. It could lead to alopecia and skin rashes. So we've already discussed those things earlier, right? Okay, but the one thing that I just want you to remember if you're giving 5-fu is that you need to avoid occlusive dressing for our patient. Usually, if we are if we know that the platelet count is depleting, we need to give occlusive dressing. Okay, we need to give pressure dressing. But for 5-fu, we need to avoid those things. Okay, and make sure that we wash hands thoroughly after coming in contact with the drug. Okay, next, we have the cytarabine. Okay, cytarabine. And the common brand name of cytarabine is Cytosar U. Okay, so for our Cytosar U or cytarabine, so our common side effects are GI toxicity, and it could also lead to cytarabine syndrome. Okay, it could lead to cytarabine syndrome. So usually, if they have cytarabine syndrome, always remember pain. Okay, pain. Why? If they have cytarabine syndrome, they could experience myalgia. Okay, what's myalgia? It's muscle pain, right? Okay, so we have bone pain. They could experience chest pain. Okay, that's why I told you that if they have cytarabine syndrome, they always remember pain. But aside from those pain that they could experience, they could also have fever, they could have some rashes, conjunctivitis, and even experience body malaise. Okay? So let's move on to our next. Okay, our next category of chemo drugs, and that is the alkylating agents. Okay, so here are some of the examples of alkylating agents. We have carmustine. Okay, carmustine, common brand name is nitrogen mustard. Okay, so common side effect of this is nausea and vomiting. Usually, carmustine is used to treat Hodgkin's lymphoma, Hodgkin's diseases in multiple myeloma. Okay, so when it comes with carmustine, so not much side effects. Okay. Next, we have cisplatin. Cisplatin. So if you will notice, the last syllables is platin, and just put all because of the alcohol part. So it's platinol. So the brand name of cisplatin is platinol. Okay, that's one of the common brand name of cisplatin, platinol. Okay, so our platinol or cisplatin usually causes neurotoxicity. It could cause nephrotoxicity and hypersensitivity reaction. Okay. And this one is one of the most common alkylating agent, and that is cyclophosphamide. Okay, cyclophosphamide. Common brand name is Cytoxan. So usually what they have is an adverse effect. Okay, and the adverse effect of cyclophosphamide is hemorrhagic cystitis. Okay, so if the patient had, well, actually not had, for us to make sure that the patient won't have cyclophosphamide, so we need to increase the oral fluid intake of our patient and make sure to tell them to frequent empty their bladder. If they feel the urge to pee, to urinate, so they need to empty their bladder. Okay, if ever the patient taking cyclophosphamide experience hemorrhagic cystitis, okay, so discontinue the medication. They need to report at once to the doctor, okay, not take the medication and report at once to the doctor so that it could be, maybe they could decrease the dose, or they could change for another agent that they could use. Okay? So next, we have the plant alkaloids. So again, plant alkaloids are known as vinca alkaloids. Okay, vinca alkaloids. Because of that, the common medications are Vin. Okay, they start with Vin, like vinblastine. Okay, vinblastine. That's Velban. Okay, we have the vincristine or Oncovin. So Oncovin is one of the more common plant alkaloids that are using. Okay, so always remember that plant alkaloids or vinca alkaloids have also their own side effects. Okay, so always remember that they always end with letter N. Okay, so all of the side effects of the plant alkaloid starts with N. So first is it could lead to neurotoxic or neurotoxicity. Okay, because of the neurotoxicity, it could affect the nerve endings that could result to neuropathy. Okay, because of that, there could be numbness. Okay, numb. Their hands are numb, their feet are numb, and because they are numb, they could have gait instability. Okay, they could lose their balance because they are losing their balance. So most likely, what will happen is they are more at risk for fall and for injury. Okay, so other side effects of plant alkaloids is the nerve of the GIT are also affected. Because the GIT nerve are affected, it decreases the peristaltic movement of the patient that results to no bowel movement. Okay, no bowel movement. Okay. So what we need to do is just to address, as nurses, we need to address the problems or the side effects that they are experiencing. Okay. So ensure the safety of the patient. We could increase the oral fluid intake. Okay, we could ask them to mobilize more. Okay, just to limit the possible side effects that they have. Okay, so the last category is our anti-neoplastic antibiotics. So again, they are also called as cytotoxic antibiotics. Okay, the most common, medication under anti-neoplastic antibiotics is, always remember my name, diba? I'm Adrian. So that's adriamycin. Okay, adriamycin. So adriamycin, doxorubicin. Okay, so always remember the letter D of doxorubicin. The letter D. Why? Because the common effect of adriamycin, first, they discolor the urine. Okay, so usually, um, patients using doxorubicin could have red urine for 1 to 2 days. So it is important that they are advised, they are being told about these things so that they won't worry once they notice that their urine is red. Okay, so red urine for 1 to 2 days, they could experience diarrhea. So since there's diarrhea, it could lead to hyperkalemia. It could lead to a heart damage later on. They could have dysrhythmias, or they could have congestive heart failure. I'm so morbid, right? But those could be the effect if they have diarrhea, right? Okay, so they could experience dyspnea if they have congestive heart failure already. So what is important is to monitor the heart activity if they are having diarrhea, if they're taking doxorubicin. Okay, aside from the discolored urine, aside from our diarrhea, it could also damage the tissue, okay, and extravasation. It could lead to damaged tissue and extravasation. So usually the movement of the WPC from the capillaries going to the tissues are impeded, okay? So basically, this is known as the diapedesis. Okay, diapedesis. Aside from that, they could experience burning, stinging sensation on the side. So if the patient tells you that there's a burning, stinging sensation on the side, we need to turn it off. We need to discontinue it. If the patient experiences infiltration, we need to discontinue it and report at once to the doctor. Okay? So basically, those are the categories of a medication. So I think we're through with our chemotherapy. So next, so we're done with the O, the operation. Then we're done with R, radiation therapy. Then C, which is chemotherapy. So what we have left are the hormonal therapy, the immunotherapy, and our bone marrow transplantation. Okay, so well, actually, the last three, the hormonal therapy, immunotherapy, and bone marrow transplantation, are shorter to discuss as compared to the radiation and chemotherapies. Okay, so let's start with hormonal therapy. So hormonal therapy are tissue specific that inhibit RNA and protein synthesis that are dependent on the opposite hormone. Okay? So meaning to say if that the hormone, for example, female hormone is the one doing the attack, so we need to give a male hormone. Okay? Or we need to give, for example, if that is estrogen that is doing the part, okay, why they have or they are experiencing the cancer, so we need to give anti-estrogen. Okay, so that's why it is stated here that it depends on the opposite hormone. It depends on, so they are dependent on the opposite hormone. So the first one that we have is prednisone. So we know that prednisone is a steroid therapy. Okay, it could be used as a hormonal therapy. Okay, so but what I want to focus is the tamoxifen citrate or the Nolvadex. Okay, we know that estrogen are precursors of cancer cells. Okay, so basically tamoxifen citrate or Nolvadex is an estrogen antagonist. They are anti-estrogen, so this could be used as an abortifacient. Okay, so why do we need to give anti-estrogen? Okay, so what are the functions of estrogen to our body? Okay, so we know that estrogen is hormone for menstruation. We know that estrogen prevent the escape of calcium on the bones. Okay, however, we should also need to remember that estrogen influences growth. Okay, they could influence tumor. Okay, so that is why we could give tamoxifen citrate because tamoxifen citrate is an anti-cancer. Okay, it is an anti-estrogen. It is an anti-estrogen, and meaning to say it could block the estrogen. Okay, and because of that, it could be used as a treatment for breast and ovarian cancer. So how are we going to know if the tamoxifen citrate is effective? Okay, so if the patient experience bone pain, it means it is effective. Why? Remember that one of the effect of estrogen is that they prevent the escape of calcium on the bones. So meaning to say, if the patient is experiencing bone pain, there are escapes of calcium in the bone. Okay? So with that, it means that the anti-estrogen medication or drugs are working. Okay? So however, if the patient experiences bone pain, what we could do is to give an analgesic upon the prescription or the order of the doctor. Okay? So, again, the bone pain happened because of the decrease of the estrogen. Okay? Because of the decrease of the estrogen, so there is a decrease of calcium on the bone. So, there are escaping from the bone, and the patient are prone to a pathologic fracture. Since they are prone on a pathologic fracture, so safety is one of our concern. Okay? So if you're going to give tamoxifen citrate, so make sure the safety of our patient. We could give analgesic to control the bone pain. However, this medication is contraindicated for pregnant. Um, since the patient would have decreased estrogen if they are taking tamoxifen citrate, so common complaints of patients are the same as the complaint of those who are experiencing menopausal activities. Okay, so they could experience hot flashes, they could be more irritable, and they could also experience um, increasing blood pressure. Okay, so next, we have the immunotherapy. So immunotherapy boosts the immune system. Okay, that's why therapy of the immune system. So it will boost the immune system, and because your immune system is boosted, so most likely it could help to destroy the tumor cells. Okay, so immunotherapy involves introduction of non-cancerous antigen or other agents in the body to stimulate production of lymphocytes and antibodies. So again, what it does is that it boosts the immune system. Okay. So here are some of the examples of immunotherapy that could be given. So there are peptide vaccine. Okay. So it stimulates the immune system. It increases the immune system. So we have the interferon or the Roferon A, okay, the interferon, the common brand name is Roferon A, which suppresses the cell proliferation and it also increases the immunity of a person. That's why they are telling that immunotherapy could also help in destroying the tumor cells. Okay, we also have the Pilgastrin. Okay, Pilgastrin. So, common brand name of this is Neupogen. So they are granulocyte colony stimulating factor. Okay, however, if you are giving immunotherapy, just think of that the side effects of these medications could be the same as the vaccine. Okay, so for example, if you have given a BCG to a person or to a baby, one of our common health teachings to them is that they could experience fever, chills, and fatigue. So same thing, if they are being given immunotherapy, they could also experience fever, chills, and fatigue. So by the way, when we talk about BCG, it stands for Bacillus calmette. Okay. So usually we give it to babies to babies to control the possibility of having primary infection, primary complex, okay, or tuberculosis among children. Okay, so the last management that we have is the bone marrow transplantation. So the bone marrow transplantation is the gold standard treatment. If the bone marrow biopsy is the gold standard diagnostic procedure for leukemia and blood dysplasia, bone marrow transplantation is the gold standard treatment for leukemia and multiple myeloma. Okay, so since there is a transplantation, so we need to have a donor. And the best donor that we could have is if you have a twin, especially if you're identical, so identical twins are the best donor. Okay, however, if you don't have an identical twin, maybe you have a fraternal twin, so that could be fine. If none, we could have our siblings. Okay, so they are the best donors because most likely we have, if not, we have higher compatibility as compared to others. Okay, usually our site for bone marrow transplantation is the posterior iliac crest. Okay, how it is done, so usually it is through a IV central catheter. It's just like doing blood transfusion, but but the blood transfusion is connected at the ileum, at the iliac area, and it is done at the operating room. Okay, so if you are doing the bone marrow transplantation, we need to check for possible side effects or reactions that they could experience. So what are those possible reactions that they could experience? One is allergic reaction. Yes, even though there's a high compatibility between siblings, so still it is a foreign thing to the person. So that is why they could have allergic reaction. So allergic reaction happens. So what we could take note is they could experience rashes. We could see rashes immediately after the treatment. Okay. So for us to be able to avoid allergic reaction, usually the doctor is prescribing antihistamine 30 minutes before the procedure. Okay. So another possible reaction is cough. Okay. Usually we know that cough could also be a sign of allergy. Okay. Allergic reaction. So usually the cough happens 1 week after the treatment. Okay. And lastly, we have the graft versus host disease. So meaning to say that the body is trying to reject the thing that we have given. So this thing happens 30 days after the transfusion. So for allergic reaction, we could easily see the rashes. But for the graft versus host disease, so the rashes happens after 30 days, okay, after the transfusion. So usually, if they've experienced this one, the doctor would advise us to give prednisone, okay, to give prednisone. So basically, I think this is the end, okay, of the cancer treatment modalities. So for our last slide, so here are some of the cancer preventions that we need to remember, okay, that we need to remember. So for us to be able to avoid skin cancer, so we need to avoid overexposure to sunlight, especially during 10 a.m. up to 3 p.m. Well, actually nowadays 9 a.m. up to 4 p.m. So usually during those times, we could notice how the sun is hitting us hard. Okay? So for us to avoid oral cancer, so we need to have annual oral examination. If we are going to notice, we are advised to have our dental appointment every 6 months. Okay, so for us to avoid oral cancers, so we need to have an annual oral examination. So next, breast cancer. So you need to do a monthly breast self-examination starting from 20 years old and above. So if you're already 20 years old, you need to do your monthly breast self-examination. Okay, for testicular cancer, if female have their monthly breast self-examination for testicular cancers, you could also do the testicular self-examination. Okay. However, for the age, so usually if you're teens, because if you'll notice, if you remember, 15 to 39 years old are commonly affected by testicular cancer. Okay. So lungs, to avoid lung cancer, so avoid cigarette smoking. Again, it is not only first hand, second hand, and third hand affectations are happening. So for early recognition, so we could have an annual chest X-ray. Okay, for us to be able to prevent colon cancer, we could have the digital rectal exam. If you are 40 years old and above, you could have digital rectal exam. By the way, digital rectal exam could also be used to detect prostate cancer. Okay, so other tests for our colon cancer, you could have rectal biopsy and proctoscopic examination. And you could have your guaiac stool exam if you are 50 years old and above. Okay. For guaiac, basically they are testing whether there are presence of blood on your poop. Okay, on your feces. Okay, so for guaiac stool exam, so make sure that they are not taking heparin or any anticoagulant for 72 days before the exam. Okay, then tell them not to eat dark colored foods that could darken the color of the stool, not to eat chocolates, okay, because that's dark color food. Other things, red meat are also prohibited for those times. Okay, usually for guaiac stool exam, it is done from your first poop for a day. Okay, but it is advisable to do this for 3 consecutive days. Your first poop are being examined. Okay, so and lastly, we have the uterus or the uterine cancer. Okay, for uterine cancer, for you to be able to early detect uterine cancer, one of the things is the annual pap smear. Okay, or when we talk about when you are 40 years old, so pap smear is known as Papa Nicolau smear test. Okay, so there are gradings or classes for it. So if usually what you could only see for the result is Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you saw Roman numeral 1, it means normal. You have normal results. If there's Roman numeral 2, so it means that you had an inflammation there. Okay? Um, Roman numeral 3 is mild to moderate dysplasia. 4 is probably malignant. And 5, it shows that there is malignancy on your uterus. Okay? So with that, hoping that we are all clear in terms of the some cancer preventions that we could do or early detection of cancer. Plus, I'm also hoping that all of the cancer modalities are also clear to all of us. Okay? So if you have questions, you can just message me or you could ask me on our meeting. So with that, thank you very much. Hopefully that you have learned a lot from our session today. Okay, so once again, this is Dr. A. Estiva, and I am wishing you all well. So stay safe, everyone, and see you on our next meeting. Take care, everyone. God bless.